I am just looking at some of the overnight. 13 million people watched the Fox News debate. I think they mean the second one. I don't know that what the numbers. I'm trying to find the numbers for Donald Trump's event as well, because the two were competing against each other last night, and it really the overnights will be coming in shortly, and we'll find out just if Trump if his gamble paid off when it comes to numbers of viewers. My guess is he did quite well, even though he was over at the Communist News Network. That likely a lot of people who never have watched CNN before may have tuned in to see a little bit about what he was up to last night with his veterans fundraiser. Meanwhile, over at the GOP debate, the reigning candidates were on stage, and probably one of the better moments of the evening had nothing to do with policy discussions or how they've already had how many of these? Now it's all down to you're a liar. No, you're a liar. You were for immigration, illegal immigration before you were against it. No, you were for illegal immigration before you were against it. It's a funny thing that the two Latino candidates were the two guys who were busting each other most about that last night. One of them, though, got off a really good shot at Trump. That was Ted Cruz. After thanking the people of Iowa, according to the Daily Caller, and saying if he is elected president, Iowa will not be flyover country, it will be fly to country. Cruz then took a moment to play the role of Trump.
Let me say, I'm a maniac, and everyone on this stage is stupid, fat, and ugly. And Ben, you're a terrible surgeon. Now that we've gotten the Donald Trump portion out of the way, I want to thank everyone here for showing the men and women of Iowa the respect to show up and make the case to the people of this state and the people of the country why each of us believe we would make the best commander-in-chief.
So the day would not have been completely uninteresting if it had not been for a new commercial released by the campaign of Mike Huckabee. Here's a little odd story. If you didn't know it, Mike Huckabee and Rick Santorum left the undercard debate and they drove a couple of miles over to the Trump event and appeared on stage with Trump. The writer Eric Erickson, also he's a talk show host, he says today that they were bowing before Zod. You know the reference? Superman movie? As Zod is the bad guy and he wants Superman to bow before him. He said they essentially just wrapped up their campaigns by doing that. In other words, when you go over to his event, you're sanctioning it. I think they're auditioning all now for that VP role. And then Trump could use a couple of people who are popular with Christians in that sense. Speaking of Christians, Mike Huckabee taking a shot at Ted Cruz. At least people who are working for Mike Huckabee. The great thing about a political action committee, if you're controlling that action committee, is you can claim that you're not really representing the candidate, and then the candidate can say, yes, they do not represent me. Christian Post has this. Supporters of Republican presidential candidate Mike Huckabee put out a new television ad attacking fellow candidate Ted Cruz, Christian Faith, accusing him of being a phony Christian for giving far less than 10% of his income to church. Folks, first of all, I'm voting for a president, not a priest. I am voting for someone who can be, in a time of a crisis, commander-in-chief and not a preacher-in-chief. So when we get down to this, everybody's saying, well, I'm a better Christian than he is. No, you're not. You go to the wrong church and you don't go often enough and you don't give away enough of your money. Who are we in this situation, to borrow a line from a well-known Christian, who am I to judge? 847, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I'm telling you right now, I've never had anything against Mike Huckabee. But if he has, and of course he can deny, it's my political action committee, they don't work for me, they're not part of my campaign. This is pretty sleazy stuff. To call people out in that sense, we have no idea. I guess Ted Cruz must have had to put this down, how much he gave to charity and everything else with all of the reporting they do. But what other work might he do that also supports his church? This becomes a rather spurious argument. Now, Glenn Beck has said he doesn't like Mike Huckabee. He said he's known him for many, many years, and he says behind the scenes, he said, I think he's a pretty sleazy guy. and that he's not who he says he is. He's not all that he's cracked up to be, even though he is beloved by a great many Christians out there when it comes time to vote. But at this point, if suddenly the whole field changed and Mike Huckabee ended up leading, which is, he's got the snowball's chance in Hades of that happening, but I wouldn't vote for the man after a commercial like that. 849, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. A little other oddity of that debate last night, Christian Post also had this. Atheists planning to stage protest at Republican presidential debate in Iowa. They did this because they were demanding that candidates leave their Christian beliefs out of politics. Well, then don't vote for him if you don't like him. If you're looking for godless, remember it was the Democrats at their convention in Charlotte, North Carolina in 2012 who booed God. Remember that? They had an argument over whether they were going to put, a reference to God in their party platform or not as they were opening the convention, and the crowd booed the vote down for God. Well, if you're an atheist, you already have your own political party. What do you care what Republicans believe? You're not going to vote for them anyway. There are more of us than either Roman Catholics or mainline Protestants, and are second only to evangelical Protestants. Of the religiously unaffiliated, 31% are atheist or agnostic, well over 17 million voters. We will be silent no longer and deserve to be appropriately recognized in the democratic process rather than being relegated to the fringe of campaign targeting. That according to one of the atheists who is speaking to Christian Post. Wow, as if someone is relegating you to the edges. Maybe you're doing it on your own because you're so incredibly obnoxious, telling people to take down displays in parks, demanding that nobody talk about their faith. What you're trying to do is eliminate it from American life. If you people weren't so insufferably, first of all, most of them are the people who got kicked around on the playground all of their lives. Somebody took their lunch money. God didn't come and rescue them, and now they're angry. Very, very angry. Or they were eating a lot of granola and hanging around the university for too long, and they've all come to believe there is no God because, of course, nobody could be smarter than they happen to be. 851. I've got no problem with atheists or agnostics, as long as they keep their mouths shut. You can reach our program today at 736-0300. That's what they want us to do, right? 736-0300. I'm just giving it back. Or you can send me an email at bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. That's bill.colley@towns. I think a lot of these people, I had a friend running for Congress some years ago. He didn't win, but he had a decent showing. And I remember him saying something to the effect, he was at some liberal university where they were having a debate, and somebody brought up the fact that he was very devout. He was not Presbyterian Church USA, but Presbyterian Church in America, which is, I think, a much more Calvinist church and much more biblically oriented. And subject came up at this college where he was speaking during this debate, and he said to the students and to the faculty and whoever else happened to be assembled there, all of the fellow travelers, he said, "I'll tell you something. When you vote for my opponent over here who never talks about faith, or you can vote for me," and he said, and ask yourself a question. Would you rather have someone serving in office who believes they happen to answer to a higher power? Or would you rather have him who thinks he's the highest power? Kind of left the crowd a little stymied on that point because they didn't quite know how to relate to that one. 853, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And, of course, we have a little bit more than an hour left of our program this week. Also wanted to share with you, coming up next week on our show, Randy Staples, of course, on Monday morning, we'll talk some legislative issues and some just general news from around Idaho. Randy was telling me last night he's going to be in Twin Falls in the next couple of weeks, and we're going to have him in studio live. And what we'll do is we'll expand that segment, and we'll open up the telephones so people can actually talk with Randy directly, because he's very much dialed in with what goes on, especially at the state capitol. So we'd like to have you, but we'd welcome you when he drops by. It'll either be in the second or third week of February that we happen to see him, being that it's a short month. He's got a couple of opportunities, and he'll be dropping by. But bringing copies of his book along, too, as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Also coming up next week on our program, as we do every Wednesday morning between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. Love their slogan. and that's life's too short not to feel good. We'll be talking about a particular medical issue, either with one of the physician assistants or Dr. Jonathan Tripp. And you're going to have an opportunity to give us a telephone call while they're on the air. And you can either call about whatever specific topic that we're discussing, but just keep in mind, you may have something else that's troubling you, an ailment or something like that. This is an opportunity to ask somebody. It won't cost you a dime. I don't think you're using a payphone, and that would be a quarter, or if they have them anymore, they're probably $1. Who knows? But it won't cost you a dime to get a little free advice from a friendly voice when it comes to your own health. That coming up next week, Wednesday morning between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. We have another caller with us. It's 854-32. You're up next. You're on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com.
Good morning, Bill. Jill Steen says to say hi. I saw her last night. Anyway, your topic about religion and stuff. Did you see the one on YouTube where Marco Rubio was in a forum and a self-professed non-believer got up and asked him how he felt and what would he do to preserve his rights? I think Rubio handled it with a lot of tact and a lot of courtesy, but said that he would believe in what he believes, which is the right answer. And I'm here to tell anybody out there that says we've got to preserve their rights. Everyone has the same rights under the Constitution.
Yeah.
What these guys want is they want to take away one person's rights to preserve what they feel is right. Now, two wrongs don't make one right.
They feel that they somehow that their feelings are hurt if they have to drive down the street and see churches. They claim that it hurts their feelings and that they have grand mal seizures, and that for that reason we have to pull down monuments, anything monuments to Christianity. It's funny though, they don't complain about Islam and Judaism or Hinduism. Their main beef seems to be just with Christianity.
Right, which should tell them that something inside of them is not right. Maybe what they should do is look at it the same way I do. Well, when I see another church that's not of my faith, I don't get all bent out of shape. I look at the architecture and stuff and see how beautiful it is.
Yeah.
Somebody made a nice work of art. You see a Christmas tree, don't get all bent out of shape about it. Look at the beauty of it. Try to look at the bright side of it instead of the wrong side. It's just I guess this is one of my biggest beefs, that two wrongs will make one right. Taking away one person's right to give another person more rights than you doesn't make it right.
And I thank you much for the telephone call. I have a friend I used to work with. I haven't actually had a chance to speak to him in many, many years, other than he occasionally leaves a comment at LinkedIn and vice versa. But he grew up in a family that was, well, nominally Muslim. They didn't. Nominally, I say, they didn't spend a lot of time over at the local mosque or Islamic center. They were very secular people. But he used to tell me growing up as a kid, and when he was 4, the family moved to Canada. So they lived out in Regina for a while, and then they went to Ottawa. But, that's the same thing. You go to the mall and you see all of the lights and the decorations, and he said, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I couldn't wait for Christmas to come around because it's such a pretty time of year to see all of the lights and the decorations. And then I read some comments from a fellow who'd been a diplomat for Iran, and he said that he was raised to hate the United States as the Great Satan, and he got sent to the United Nations to actually work in the delegation there. And he said he left the airport, he got into the limo, and he said we were driving down through the city of New York, and he said, my gosh, there's a church on every corner. I had been told Americans were godless. Every corner. And he's right about New York City. You're amazed. I mean, I remember first couple of times I ever went there to visit how many churches we spotted. And when I used to work in one city in upstate New York, I remember we would joke that in the Roman Catholic faith that there was one on every block, one church, because there were that many. Frankly, the rest of the world doesn't get it. And yet these were people who, because of their own religious faith, you would think that they would want nothing to do with Christianity and that they would want to wipe us out. But they ended up having great respect, number one, for just seeing that, first of all, the decorations aren't biblical, of course. Well, normally they aren't. Some are. But they were very surprised by that, and they found it nice. And again, the diplomat, it changed his mind about Americans when he realized that, yes, many of us are devout people. Not a bad thing around this world, trust me. 33, 9 o'clock news is up next. Bill Colley with you this morning. Speaking of Trump, we'll share some of his thoughts from his event last night. As usual, he was in fine form.